A creepy man stalked me in the woods when I was stranded on the road at 3 a.m. I grew up in the South. Tons and tons of beautiful places to see that haven't been taken over by concrete yet. It's nice, but along with that, it's pretty boring. Being a teenager and wanting to go out and have fun led to mostly improvising with your buddies and hoping something good would come out of the night. There wasn't really a local spot to go hang out, like a club or cool bar, and the places that were close to this was boring because you did them so many times. I'm sure if you've ever lived in a rural area, you can understand that feeling completely. Something that I found a ton of enjoyment in as a teen was just cruising around super late at night, listening to music. I would fill my gas tank up, grab something to drink on, a cigarillo, and I would just take off driving, around until the sun came up. It was a way for me to clear my mind and relax. Those country back roads were always fun to drive down at 2 a.m. and was also just the right amount of spooky. Well, one night, I absolutely got more than I was to bargain for. I can't remember what month it was exactly, but I know for a fact it was in the summertime because I was out of school, and I also remember it being a comfortable, chill night. So, if I was to guess, it just had been around July or August. I was cruising around like I always did and was completely worry-free. I had music blaring and I was in my zone. I decided to head down to a park just out of boredom. This particular park is at the very end of a long stretch of desolate country road, but it's a really pretty drive because of that. When I say desolate country road, I don't mean that it's some dirt road that goes through the woods or anything crazy like that. It is a normal paved road, but there's really nothing on it after a certain point. The entire road takes about 20 minutes to drive down to get to the park, and after about 10 minutes into the drive, the houses start to get spread out further and further, to becoming no houses and just road leading into the park. I think a lot of the reason I like this drive at night is because of how creepy it was, and I looked at it as some sort of adventure or whatever. The park isn't open for camping or anything. It's mostly just a lot of land with walking trails and biking trails set up through miles of woods. So, obviously, at around 3 a.m. in the morning, it's pretty dead. I made it there and just did a slow, normal little loop around drive of the park. The night before, it stormed very badly. So badly, I remember my parents and I had to take shelter because of the threat of a tornado touchdown. There ended up being no tornado, but the storms were pretty damn rough. Because of this, I came up on a fallen tree in the road that looped around to the exit of the park that must have happened because of the storm. It wasn't some massive tree or anything, but I know for a fact that there was no way I could have gotten over it in my car, obviously. It was pitch black everywhere, besides the front of my car, because of my headlights, and because of that, I immediately ruled out backing up the entire way I just drove when I entered the park. I knew that was super dangerous, and there was no way. At this spot on the road, there was flat land on each side of me. I figured that it would make the most sense to just back up in the grass beside me, just a little, and then drive back the way I came. It was a one-way loop around the park, but I wasn't really worried about going out the wrong way since it was so late. So, I started to back up off the road so I could get my car turned around. All was good until I went to pull back up on the road. I totally didn't take into account how wet the grass was and the amount of mud. My car went absolutely nowhere. My back tires were completely stuck and were spinning in place as I was trying to floor the gas pedal. I started to become pretty scared at this point, not the most ideal situation to be in. I immediately take my cell phone out of my pocket and saw that I had service. Super huge feeling of relief. I called my parents and told them what happened and where I was. They were pretty pissed at me, but said they will pay for a tow truck to come get me out. My parents both drove small 4-door sedans, and they would have been zero help in this situation. I was about 45 minutes away from my house and the rest of most human civilization. So, I realized that I would be stuck out there for at least an hour before someone was able to get to me. Freaky feeling, but I tried getting it out of my head and just continued to listen to music and be on my phone in the car while I waited. Not really much more I could do. After I kind of calmed down from the initial anger I had, I started to check out my surroundings. I didn't even notice at first because of everything going on, but in front of my car's placement was a field that was full of the most amount of deer I think I've ever seen at once. There legitimately must have been 40 deer in this field just walking around and eating the grass. The field wasn't directly in front of my car, but if I was to get out and throw a rock in that direction, I would have easily been able to hit one of them. So, if I was to guess, they were about 30 yards out. This didn't really help with the creepy level going on. Looking out in front of your car and seeing ADI reflections staring back at you is a bit of an alarming feeling overall, but I was relieved it was just a field of deer. I watched them for a little bit, but I was quickly over it and started to just browse through my social media apps while waiting. They seemed to have been over it quicker than I was because they all went back to walking around and eating once they figured out that I wasn't going to attack them or anything. After browsing my phone for about 15 minutes, I finally get a call back from my parents, letting me know that a tow truck guy is on the way and about an hour and a half out from my location. Still to this day, I remember hearing that and having the thought, you have got to be fucking kidding me. I understood that me and only me was the reason I was in the situation I was in, so I couldn't really be mad at anyone else. But that was very obviously not what I wanted to hear. I decided that the smartest thing for me to do was just make sure my doors were all locked, lay back in my seat, and take a nap to pass time quickly. So, that's what I did. Okay, here we go. So, I wake up 45 minutes later to the feeling of being watched. I'm not sure if anyone has ever experienced that feeling before, because I don't know how common it is, but there was a sixth sense alarm going off in my head, telling me that I needed to wake up. Waking up to that feeling in the situation I was in and the surrounding I was in is probably the worst case scenario. I sit up and immediately check my surroundings and see nothing. I look through my car very quickly for any sort of weapon and found a pocket knife. A fucking pocket knife. I was very scared. Even though I saw and heard absolutely nothing, that feeling is terrifying. I was shocked to see that the field of deer in front of me was still full of deer. I don't know anything about the animal, but I guess I always just assume they don't hang out in the same place for long. Not sure why I thought that, but I was surprised to see them nonetheless. I called my parents back to see if they heard any kind of update from the tow truck dude. I decided not to mention the feeling I was having, because I didn't want them to worry more, and I also knew that it was literally nothing more than a feeling I had, and had nothing to back up why I was feeling that way, other than just being spooked out in general. No update from the tow truck guy, so we all assumed everything was still the same on his end. The call lasted just a few minutes, because I felt like such a dick. They both had to wake up for work in a few hours, now have to spend a random $100+, and on top of all of that, they were worried about me. I could tell they were annoyed at the situation, but worried. I told them I'll make sure to tell them when the guy arrives, and I'm sorry. We hung up, and I looked up from the phone and immediately went from 0 to 100 in panic mode. The deer in front of me were all completely perked up, staring in the same direction right of them. Let me remind you that there are around 40 deer in this field. Every single one of them were stopped dead in their tracks, standing completely still, looking at something. I put my high beams on and stared, waiting for absolutely anything to happen at all. Nothing. I tapped my horn real quick. They didn't even budge or look my way. They were all still completely glued to what was by them. The way the tree line was, I couldn't see that far over in the field. I knew they were looking into the woods by them, but where I was at, I was only able to see them. I could hear my heartbeat. I grabbed that stupid pocket knife and just waited for something to happen. I would say it was about a minute after I honked. Every single one of them in unison started to run the opposite way. They were running at full speed, and within 20 seconds the field was completely empty. I was petrified in fear. I knew that staying in my car is what would be the safest thing to do, but it's the worst feeling in the world when you feel like a sitting duck. My head was on a swivel. I was freaking out in every way possible. I assumed that it was a bear or something, but it could have been absolutely anything. I was convinced at that point that it was the devil himself. I didn't know what to do. I knew that the tow truck was close by, but I had no idea where he was. I began to shake because of nerves and just looked around to make sure nothing was by me and focusing on the field in front of me. I did this for what felt like an eternity, sitting in complete silence and darkness in the middle of nowhere, waiting for something to jump out and attack you. 15 of the longest minutes of my life go by, and I start to see lights break through the tree line on the road. As it gets closer, I see it as the tow truck guy. The lights on his truck felt like it was Jesus coming from heaven to rescue me. He gets up to me, and I jump out of my car and immediately ask him if he has a gun on him. I told him very quickly what just happened to me, and that something is definitely out here nearby. He let me know that he had a shotgun in the truck, and assured me that it was most likely a bear or bobcat. He gave me the whole "they're more scared of you than you are of them" bullshit. The tree was small enough for him to sort of bulldoze it out of the way with his truck, and then he attached my car to his and pulled me out of the spot I was stuck in. He was very nonchalant about what I just experienced, but I was pretty badly shaken up from it. The whole time he was doing his thing, I still had my eyes glued out in that field, waiting for something. He was completely done with everything in about 15 minutes, and he told me to follow his truck out of there onto the main road again. I got in my car and was ready more than anything to get the hell out of this park. We started to drive away from the spot I was in, and I still had my head on a swivel, completely shook up. As we were driving away, I looked in my rearview mirror. We were down the park road just a tiny bit, but I could still see the spot I was stuck in partially lit up from the vehicle's lights and the moon. I watched in my rearview mirror. A man came out of the tree line behind where my car was and walk into the middle of the road and watched us drive away. My heart stopped beating. Legitimately. I lost my breath and my eyes started to get full of tears because of how absolutely scared I was in this moment. I couldn't see any sort of detail like what he looked like or even necessarily what he was wearing. To be honest, I don't really care. The feeling that I felt driving away from that spot, knowing he was right there the whole time watching me as I was freaking out looking around, watching me as I was completely alone for a long time, maybe even coming right up to my window and watched me as I slept. That's a feeling that is something I can't necessarily put into words all these years later, and it still messes with me quite a bit. The entire time we were driving off, as long as I could see him, he didn't move. Just watched us in the road. A million things went through my mind. I was scared there may have been multiple people up the road waiting for us. I was trying to figure out if I should start beating on my horn like crazy to get the tow truck guy to stop or not. I decided that all I wanted to do was get out of there. More than anything. The second that we finally got out of the park and was able to be on a 2-lane road again, I flew past the tow truck driver and I did nothing below 70 miles per hour the entire way home. I flew through stop signs and stoplights. I absolutely did not care. The only thing on my mind was making it home. I got home, ran inside, very quickly acknowledged my parents and said sorry and thank you and went to my room. I didn't get a single second of sleep the rest of the night. I was searching for any sort of records of things happening in that area, escaped convicts, similar stories, etc. I came to the conclusion that the man was some sort of squatter or homeless. I read many things online how it's common for homeless people in rural areas to build a shelter in the woods, which does make sense to me entirely on why they would do that. But obviously, the unknown is the scariest part of it all. What if he wasn't homeless? What if he was going to hurt me? What if? There's so many possibilities of what could have happened, but the outcome that did happen is what I am most grateful for. I never told my parents this story until many years after it happened and I was already an adult and moved out. It freaked them the fuck out too when I told them. I never went back to that park, ever. Even though I no longer live by there, I still have no desire at all to ever go back there. I don't think I could, even in broad daylight with a ton of people around. I also made the decision to stop doing those late-night cruises. I did a few after that time with people, but even then I felt very uncomfortable and on edge. So, man in the woods, let's not meet ever again.